Good morning. It's a distinct honor for me today to introduce our speaker. Rand Eberhard is the director of Congregational Care here at Church of the Apostles. He's a local boy. He grew up in Alpharetta and attended Toccoa Falls Bible College. He's a graduate of Fuller Theological Seminary and former youth pastor here. He has a lovely wife, Jenny, and 3 daughters, Elizabeth, Olivia, and Emma Drew. And so, Rand, if you will come on up. There's other parts of this story that I left out because he's going to cover it.
And the crowd went wild. Yay! Come on, guys. Wake up.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Thanks for that nice introduction, Scott. I'm going to unpack a little bit about my life to kind of set the stage to explain why I do what I do and how I do it, and the gift that it is to even be in community and network with each of you. The answer to prayer that is for me and my calling and my vocation as vocational ministry consists of a lot of need, a lot of the times, and each of you can attest to the fact that our lives right now pretty much feel like a constant state of trauma. You know, not only tuning into the news and just seeing the next update, be it weather or pandemic or whatever else our world is wrestling with. There's been a huge amount of death in our world, but specifically in our church. Usually we have about 12 funerals a year. In the last 6 weeks or so, we have over 20 people that have died in the church. So it's the demand on each of our lives and the uniqueness of what you do and what you're called to is requires a certain degree of perseverance, and that perseverance can be found in community and finding rest and soul care in your own right, but also to co-labor with people that you trust. And that's why this senior care network is such a blessing to me, because I've known Jonna Payne, one of the board members back here that greeted you at the door. I've known her for several years, and just this summer she invited me to be a part of the network and then host and then speak. So I'm wondering what's next. This is pretty good. Yeah, and Kyril's one of our beloved members of the church here, and he too is a friend. And I've been out to the Good Samaritan Clinic myself a number of times, a part of the spiritual support community that he hosts us each month. And small world, Bob Smith was my mom's boss for 30 years, and my mom works now for Chris Smith, her son. And I grew up in Alpharetta, as Scott shared a part of my bio. But a short introduction, a bit more on where I come from and how, by God's grace, I have been given the ability to see with the eyes of the heart and understand the pain and misery that I lived through as an addicted person. I struggle with substance abuse and a general sense of apathy in life for a number of years, and thankfully had the opportunity to go to a recovery program called No Longer Bound up in Forsyth County, lived there for 9 months and learned what it growing into adulthood really looked like, to own my own problems, to deal with the conflicts of my heart, to recognize what I now know to be a cycle of despair, and living in a hopeless world where you feel under-resourced and you feel a lack of value, and you certainly have an absence of calling and perspective and a sense of belonging in a broken world. You just kind of aimlessly wander through life and allow emotions and circumstance to inform your behavior. And that's how I conducted my life for a long time. And when substance abuse is involved, or chemical dependency, and normally what happens is collateral damage ensues. So what I want to talk about today is just a general presentation of the concept of a clinical assessment called the biopsychosocial assessment. And by way of my own efforts in being a people helper, I've added, not myself, not my idea, but as part of what I do in developing a game plan. If you sit somebody down that's living a high-risk lifestyle or has overwhelming need, if you say, hey, I'm going to put you on a recovery plan, that usually doesn't sit well. But if you invite them to consider developing a framework for life that is an invitation into something that is life-giving and good, then the concept of passion as have to becomes want to, where there is passion. Otherwise, you're just handing down an expectation on somebody's life. And in the recovery world, and when you're dealing with a wounded person, expectations are premeditated resentment. Think about that. Life demands much of each one of us. But unless we see the big picture, or we have a sense, an intrinsic calling deep within our heart and our spirit, then getting up at 5 a.m. or getting home at 10 p.m. day after day, or whatever it is, can become a burden. And there's no sense of belonging or purpose that goes beyond circumstances. So passion helps us persevere, and when we sit with somebody and lay out a perspective for life, and we think optimistically, and we analyze the various areas of need in their life, then we're able to zero in on the ones that we can in fact help with. One of the things that can very easily happen is you sit with somebody that has 21 unique needs or more, or 15, and they want you to just resolve their whole world. We can all attest to that, I'm sure, but developing a game plan like I'm going to present to you is very helpful as just a general entry point to encourage them and lay out life with them. And the goal in my ministry and being a restoration worker is listening with my whole heart. I know each of you are good listeners, and each of you are about an area of service and restoration work in your own right. But when you listen well and you listen with your whole heart, you see the person in front of you and you're fully present with them, you access their heart, you gain trust, and you access credibility, and you're then invited to speak truth and be an encourager to that person in that point of need. So part of my calling to ministry is, as it's been defined by one author, is calling is where our greatest passion in a world's deepest need align. So passion and need, there's an alignment there. And of course, in my life, there is a divinely inspired invitation handed down from God himself, the living God, that says, you've been restored, now go be a restoration worker. So by default, as a recovered person, now 20 years, I work in recovery ministry. And some of it is ministry out front, but more of it than anything is just being the presence of hope in a broken world to somebody that has nobody to look to. And each one of you are that kind of worker, restoring somebody to hope, positioning them for influence and impact in their family, in their world, no matter what their age is. So restoring people to a good plan, restoring people to a divinely inspired idea, a calling, restoring people to hope at the very least. And hope, as I've defined in my ministry overview for Congregational Care, is this: the joyful anticipation of good. So it's in hopelessness, it's in despair that we allow the absence of peace to become the condition of our heart. And then our wounded heart informs our behavior again. Collateral damage ensues. Relationships, vocation, finances, mental health, etc. So hope, healing, harvest, becoming a worker of making an impact on the world. That's the theme of Congregational Care here at Church of the Apostles. Affect someone for hope, help them find a pathway to peace. And what that looks like is listening well, analyzing the problems in their life, and then making a recommendation that they might be optimistic and motivated to pursue help. So John has been a big part of that for a number of years in the area of senior care. So there's two parts of the ministry. There's the response side, which is hospital, funeral, and various presenting issues that people face in the church, be it financial and benevolence or senior care issues. So Jana, for several years, has been a key resource to me, and now to be part of the network, and with John and Scott and each of you to have this network is an incredible resource to our community, our church, and I have full confidence that you guys are credible people because you're a part of the organization. And it goes a long way for us to make a confident referral to the unique things that you guys do. So ultimately, one of the questions I ask when people reach out to me is, are you calling me to feel better or get better? And we can all attest to the fact that we want to be encouragers and host people with kindness and compassion. But at the end of the day, if they're not going to do their part, we're not going to do their part for them. And sometimes we just flat out can't. So codependency is, Laura Rieslinger is from Pyramid Healthcare. I invited her to be part of the network. She immediately joined. And Pyramid Healthcare is another one of my key referral sources for psychological trauma, emotional woundedness. Jennifer, her friend, is with her today. She's an LCSW. They're going to tour Silver Ridge later today, which is a resident recovery center. They have various locations in Alpharetta and Sandy Springs, and they deal with holistic treatment and psychological care, eating disorders, recovery, etc. But one of the things that I do is affect a person for hope, optimistically think about what is the best referral for this person after they are in agreement that yes, they will receive help and make an effort to help themselves. So codependency is caring more about someone's problem than they do. And that doesn't just apply to addiction. That applies to what each of you do. Working harder on someone's life than they do. Accepting somebody's responsibility for them. So let some of these be indicators if somebody has moved the boundary stone too far into your world, that you care deeply and you empathize, but you're not going to own somebody's problem for them, and you're certainly not going to work harder on their life than they do. And that's not mean. That's being fair and truthful to then resource them and put the ball back in their court and say, I'm going to walk with you, but you got to step one foot in front of the other. PT, right, John? Fun experience. So it's an encouragement, an assessment, a referral, and within the church here, we have a counseling team. We have a board-certified counselor. We have a women's counselor, and then a marriage and premarital counselor. I do some of this myself, but I primarily do what I'm running through here. And these are free services within the church that we offer to the community, to our membership. And then usually once we get a person to a certain point or identify that this person has a greater level of need for specialized care, then we're able to refer them out. We refer people to Chiral, and to many of you already I've made several introductions. So listening and people helping in recovery concepts. Leading and listening with your heart. I spoke to that a little bit. 9 areas of need, 20 areas of need. Discerning what you're in fact able to help with. Utilizing this very competent referral network. And being honest with what you can and can't or won't do. And there's peace in simplicity. And there's empowerment and expecting the other to actually follow through with steps 1, 2, or 3 before you give them the full idea in their life. So addiction is an ever-increasing desire for something that has an ever-decreasing ability to satisfy. So when you think about addiction, it doesn't always mean substance abuse. It can often be destructive behavior or coping mechanisms that don't deliver resolution and long-term sustainable peace and functional lifestyle. So if a person is more obsessed with their problems than they are actually working on them and finding resolution, just identifying that alone can be helpful. And speaking truth and saying, hey, you know what, every time we sit and talk, you lead with your problems versus speaking optimistically about what could be. So helping people just generally identify a condition of the heart and an absence of passion and clarity of purpose in their life that can be a first stepping stone. So one of the key quotes that I use to grab that whole concept is, the happiest, most productive people are those with clarity of purpose. So when you do have some clarity of purpose, a sense of belonging, and the strategy to get there, then passion begins to emerge from a hopeless or high need situation in life. Change itself doesn't occur until the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of having to change. So change requires mourning the loss of something. If you're going to have a true lifestyle change or heart change, then you have to identify, well, what are the patterns of my life, and are they helpful to my environment, to my social network, or are they exhausting? And am I more of a contributor or more of a taker in any given context? So change doesn't happen until you're tired of being the way you are. And then you actually invite somebody to help you. And when you do invite somebody to serve as a helper, then you got to allow them to help you. So let that be a perspective that you carry into how you help people, that as soon as they ask for help, they've got to trust you to some degree. And if they don't want to receive your help, then you got to be honest with them and say, hey, look, I'm trying to help, but you won't allow me to help you. And here's the example of running uphill and why it's not working. Doesn't mean you give up, doesn't mean you don't care, but in some cases it's good to refer even a senior care need to somebody that fits that need specifically and can help well, be it a LCSW or a clinical worker or a medical need, whatever it may be, identifying what it is that situation calls for and being honest with yourself that you might care deeply, but caring for 25 cases in a day can run its course if you don't cut to the chase and you're not honest after being affirming and optimistic and encouraging somebody, affecting them for hope. So change doesn't occur. I didn't write this. This is out of the concept of a book called Change or Die, written by a medical doctor. Okay, I recommend reading it because it's helpful for your industry. But the gist of the book is that people don't change based on force, fact, or fear. You can present statistics. You can tell. Many of you have had more conversations about this than I have. You can tell somebody about heart disease or smoking or whatever it might be. That's not going to shift their perspective. People have the tendency to change in the context of a relationship. So as you resource and you co-labor with colleagues in this room, and you have confidence that you are walking with the individual, with a team of people to see change occur in their lives, you're resourcing them, and it should give you full confidence that you're doing them a good service, and you don't have to beat yourself up if it's not working. So change happens in the context of a relationship. 90% of the time we're unhappy with ourselves because 90% of the time we think about ourselves. Key quote. A lot of people that sit in misery and just find that to be the condition of their life, be it a latter stage of life and pain and suffering, fear of death, whatever it might be, obsessive thinking can be an affliction. It can be something that the fleeting thought becomes obsessive thought, and that affects the condition of the heart and affects everything around them. So enter this concept of a game plan. Do we think deeply and critically about our problems, and do we seek counsel, and do we resource people well? And for the individual we're helping, are they just thinking about their problem and then their problem becomes their problem? Or are they thinking strategically about how to bring resolution and how to even suffer well and how to embrace whatever is handed down as a result of just life and progression that we'll all face. So the biopsychosocial model, some of this I pulled from an article, includes three concepts: psychological factors, biological, and sociological. As a pastor, a discipleship person, I've included that spiritual formation and discipleship as a critical element, as foundational to see a person experience victory, faith, hope, and love, the fruit of the Spirit, which many of you know, but essentially the love of God and peace of God that transcends understanding, that we can't find outside of the move of God in our lives, okay? So biological factors define are any chemical, physical, neurological, or genetic condition associated with psychological disturbances. So I've listed a few there: environmental toxins, diet, appetite, hormones, sleep, exercise habits, health and wellness in general. So on the back of the page, you see as I've listed goals and strategies for each of these four categories, just as an example. One of the things that I do with a person who's facing a lot of demand in their life and their lives have become unmanageable, be it substance abuse or just general depression and anxiety, is you lay out a game plan and you have this interactive document that I use, a Google document, to have a real-time document that I can interact with that individual with on a daily basis, have a short reading, have a goal and a strategy that person's accountable to follow through with. A goal for biological health and wellness concept might be some form of activity on a daily basis, physical activity, some form of awareness around diet, exercise, and then a strategy to come behind some of that might be signing up for the Parkinson's boxing class that we saw 2 months ago that was presented here, a really good presentation, and resourcing them with that and saying, hey, let's see you follow through with one meeting at Delgado Boxing. And that being a key strategy is a follow-up to a goal being let's make an effort to get out of the home and engage, even if the excuses come in, like I don't have a ride or I don't have the money or whatever it might be. All you're trying to do is resource them. And again, if they don't want to do their part, then all you can do is roll out ideas. And once you're to a few ideas, and you see pretty quickly whether or not they want to receive the help offered. So you can't own their problem for them. Psychological factors refer to a person's thought processes and how they influence mental state and behavior, impact a person's physical well-being. According to the neuroplasticity, up to 85% of patients with chronic pain experience severe depression. As research states, chronic pain and depression are closely correlated, and one disorder affects the other's progress. So co-occurring disorders in a clinical context, it usually means that if substance abuse or chemical dependency are co-occurring with a mental health issue like bipolar or depression or chronic anxiety. So anxiety is a big thing in our world today with people from all ages and all walks of life. Anxiety, generally speaking, deals with the absence of guarantee. Again, obsessive thinking, living in the fear of the future and what if kind of perspective on life and what's to come, and tuning in constantly to news channels to see what the latest threat on our world is. Obsessing about being informed is fine. Obsessing about things that don't affect your heart for good isn't healthy. It doesn't mean that you want to live in the dark and be unaware of what's going on and not in tune with our world, but it does mean that foundationally for me, if you don't have this life-giving, living water flowing into your life that cleanses the soul and informs the life and gives you a pathway to peace, then you're missing a big part of what God has placed us on this earth for. So personality, psychological traumas, stress, coping skills, suffering, reaction to illness, suicidal ideation, all of these things are psychological factors. Being grounded in the present, living in the moment, embracing what the day has, and being a mover and a motivator is essential to psychological well-being. We can't sit around and just wish our problems away. We have to actually mobilize and see something good take its course. Social factors include some of what's listed there: family, marital status, cultural influences, religion, hobbies, employment, legal, financial. All of these can be stressors or presenting issues that affect a person's psychological well-being or life as a whole. And these can be indicators for you as you sit with somebody and roll through these 4 areas. You can identify pretty quickly what a person's recurring problem is. And a lot of times it's social more than anything else because it affects psychological and biological. For example, one of the things I do when I sit with people is have them write a list of 20 folks they interact with the most. Maybe for some in a senior care stage of life, maybe that's 5, maybe that's 10. But if you go through this concept of giver versus taker, it helps them become self-aware as to who, in fact, is bringing life into their desperate need, or who is demanding life or hindering peace from being the condition of their day-to-day experience. So writing a list of 20 names, writing next to their name, just as you think about it, giver or taker. And a lot of times people that are in a wounded state of life have out of 20 people, have 15 to 18 that are takers, that take far more than they contribute. So we need to make sure that people are resourced with encouragers, with optimistic thinkers, with helpers, with people that are motivated to further that person's potential and not just prey off of them and be intense, high demand people that are attempting to help but become frustrated and judgmental and critical. So that particular exercise itself is a huge part of identifying a social context being high risk or being healthy and life-giving for an individual. Help create goals and strategies in each of these is pretty self-explanatory. Part of doing it requires, as a helper, you to sit well with the problem and use your intellect, use your network, and use your resources to think critically about a person's life and speaking truth and love, restoring a person to hope and to calling, but also asking really good questions is essential to helping a person discover from their heart intrinsically who they are, why they're here, and where they're going, and how to get there. So when you ask good questions that help them come to self-realization and name for themselves the answer they're looking for, that's effective counsel. You can hit them with the highest wisdom you have, but until they say it themselves, until they walk out with that concept, they're not going to embody that conviction. So it's good to have an idea about well-being and know the right things to say, but it's far more influential to see a person walk out with their own information and being able to articulate that. So vision motivates, strategy mobilizes. Vision casting with people requires a follow-up with strategizing how to get there. So I encourage you to ask good questions, lay out these goals and strategies with people, consider using a Google Doc, an easy way to help 10 different people in a day with some pretty, and resource them with some pretty influential things that can change the course of their life. And I'll close with this one verse that really captures the essence of the God of the Bible and my faith and the restoration ministry that I'm a part of. And it says in John 14:21 that it says, "He who has my command and obeys it," the words of Christ, "he is the one who loves me. And he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I too will love him and show myself to him." Obedience and love go hand in hand, and these things are met with the revelation of God and a deeper and higher wisdom that goes beyond anything that we can ascribe ourselves in our own effort. So thanks for letting me join you today. I'm glad to be a part of this great organization, and I've included my contact information at the top of the page if you'd like a follow-up conversation or want to do some question and answer. As John said, I have to run to a graveside service. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Thank you.